And I think we have a really exciting program, a long overdue program for you all today. Miami Grove Revisited, a look at what is now called the Nature Preserve. This area, yesterday was Miami Grove, today the Nature Preserve. Years ago, when it was Miami Grove, it was the home to very many special families. To me, Miami Grove is probably, I can say arguably, but I don't want to argue with anybody, but I think it's the most beautiful part of Terrace Park. The little Miami River meanders by, and the woods and the fields there, the trees. It's just a very peaceful, beautiful place. And there's lots of memories, lots of stories that those woods and trees and river could tell. You're going to hear some of those stories today. Some of them were very pleasant stories, some of them were real hardships, because there wasn't always, as you will hear today, some of the things that we in Terrace Park knew about Miami Grove weren't necessarily true. There was a lot of people were discriminated against. And there was some very sad times for the people that lived there. Fortunately, there were happy times too. But it was a beautiful area, and when it started in the 1920s, it was summer camps for people that lived in the city, and they'd come out and they'd want to fish and canoe and swim and enjoy the beauty of this wonderful area. There was a club. There's some wonderful photos. I hope you all get the opportunity to see the club.
Sue, I think the sound's awfully muffled. Is there anything we can do to get some treble out of that?
This way? To that? Maybe the volume needs adjusting, but not sure.
This is our engineer.
Yes, we'll get our engineer. This is a new system. Bill, is that better? You can hear?
No, yeah.
Better at the back?
Stand to the side so you don't stand in front of the screen.
Okay. This better? Better in the back? Okay. Club Villena was a nightclub. People came from all over to hear the music and the big bands. It provided music for the summer resort when people were down there. And the whole area was just fun. It was a happy area, a happy time. And then the Depression came. And with the Depression, the cabins were pretty much abandoned. They were left to the ravages of the floods that came in almost every spring. And the place just started going downhill. A man named Alvin Hodge owned the property, bought the property, and began renting it to families who needed a place to live. Started for the summertime. Then it went on, and the people lived there year-round. And some of them, at some point in time, was, you really need to leave, this is just a summer place. No, it was their home. It was their home, they wanted to stay, they wanted to be there. And it became a community. They had their own baseball team. Got a picture from Dottie of somebody in a Miami Grove shirt. There was a cafe down there. That was part of the controversy. Earl's Cafe in Terrace Park had a terrible reputation. It was written up in the newspapers as being one of the roughest bars in Southwest Ohio. And apparently there's some truth to that too. But anyway, Earl's Cafe, because of the controversy and the dislike of it in the village, the road that went down to Miami Grove was in terrible disrepair. As early as 1947, many of the residents, the fathers of some of the people you see here today, signed a letter over there begging the village to fix the potholes, which some of them were 16 inches deep. And there was no way, like the emergency fire, the doctors, at that time doctors made house calls. The Red Cross often went down and did some things for health reasons. They helped out people that lived in the Grove, and they couldn't get down there, the milkman. And so they begged the village to please repair that road. And the answer, as you will see, was really like, well, we don't have enough money, we have all kinds of roads to repair. So it was not always very pleasant for people that lived in the Grove. The children went to Terrace Park School, and there were some problems there too, but there was some pleasant. there were, in talking, and I've had a wonderful time talking with the Bowmans and Scotts and Wiseman, there were a lot of very pleasant experiences. I heard wonderful stories, families such as the Gates, Buskins, Ronsleys, St. Thomas Church, when the floods would come in. The people from St. Thomas Church would go help, the Red Cross would go in, often by boat, help get the people out, some of them waiting on rooftops to be rescued, to bring them here to the community house. Mary Scott Olson told me she remembers as an infant practically being in the community house when the floods came and sleeping here, when villagers would bring blankets and food and really try to help out. Then each spring, back down after the floodwaters would recede, the residents would go back to their home and try to make the most of what had been there and really make it their home again. The 1957 flood, or excuse me, 1957 January, the sirens went crazy early, there was snow on the ground, it was freezing cold. Anybody that lived anywhere near Miami Grove could see the thick black smoke. Earl Runyon's Cafe had burned to the ground. Little controversy about the efforts to get down there and save it, but regardless, it was gone. Couple months later, floods came. The 1957 flood was really the worst. Some of the homes were just taken out, flat out gone. 59? Okay.
59.
All gone. And they said, don't go back there, there's nothing there. Some of the families still went back, that was their home, they wanted to be there. And they made it work for a while. A couple years later, the Board of Health came in and said no more. Everybody had to leave, the place was condemned. And from then on, it really went in even more disrepair. And children in the village would go down and kind of peek at what had been Miami Grove, looked in the cottages, what had been there. The rivers and the kids were the only ones that really still visited the Grove. There was a wonderful old place called Arcady Club, which was down near Earl's, a beautiful building, I understand, from Bobby Scott that used to be like a club. And the stone chimney that is still down in the Grove was part of the Arcady Club. So the books are still open on a lot of history, but in just having the opportunity to talk with a lot of former residents, we've learned a lot. We're going to learn a lot more today. We want to hear from Dottie Bowman and Janet Olson.
Right.
Okay, and Rita. These two are sisters. Sister-in-law? Is that correct?
No.
No, just friends.
Just friends.
Okay. Bobby Scott is representing the Scott family, and if you've noticed over here, the list of Scotts, he was born in Miami Grove, but starting with his parents, all the way down, sisters and so on. I went to school with Jerry and Helen Fay, as many of you in my age group did. Bobby is kind of the spokesperson for his family today. And Max Wiseman, whose parents moved to the Grove in 48. Max was too young to remember much, but his parents couldn't be here today, but they have told him stories over the years. Many of us who were at Terrace Park School in the 50s remember Max's brother, Arthur, who unfortunately died of leukemia when we were in the 4th grade. And to many of us, that was our first experience with death, and it had quite an impact. I have a friend who went to school with us who lives out west now, and I just emailed him and I said, do you remember Arthur Wiseman? And he wrote back, oh my God, of course I remember Arthur Wiseman. I remember him very well. And we have little books over here, some of the things that we made for Arthur when he was sick from the 4th grade that the Wiseman family loaned us. The Bowmans and the Scotts have loaned us wonderful photos and some artwork. If any of you know, we're trying to track down Freddie Williams' art. Apparently Freddie Williams, and he did paint this picture of the Bowman home. But we know there's more Freddie Williams out there. I think Paul Scott told me that Freddie Williams came to Miami Grove, absolutely fell in love with it, felt like many of us did. It was just unbelievably beautiful area, and he painted and he painted. I know out there's paintings of Earl Runyon's Cafe and some of the other cabins and camps that were homes to so many. Wonderful families, people I've mentioned today, Stevens, Scotts, Wiseman, Halseys, Chipwoods. Those of you who grew up in Terrace Park during the 40s, 50s, I'm sure remember these families, the McGees. Very wonderful people, and We need to hear from them and hear what it was like. Well, why don't we start with Dottie? And we're just going to hear some stories from former residents. Dottie, we're going to try this. We do have another. Let me see.
I may be loud enough with that one.
Try that.
Try it.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I have a very, I'd rather hear.
Okay, that's fine. I want you to be comfortable.
I have a very loud voice. And
Yay.
talk that way. As you know, I grew up down in the Grove, and stop me anytime you want to say something. But for the kids down in the Grove, it was a good place. For the people up in Terrace Park, it was a horrible place. The kids down in Terrace Park treated each other good. The people from Terrace Park treated us terrible. They looked down their noses at us, and we were scum and river rats and all that. I think as an adult, I turned out pretty well. So has the rest of us. Runyon's had a bad name. I found out about it after I grew up. As a child, Gladys and Earl Runyon were good to us. Before their place burned down, we could go and pick flowers. Never went in the back door of that place. We went in, well, we call it the front door, which was really the back door, because the back door was really the front door, if you're a child. We were never allowed to go up the steps into the dance hall. We went up the back steps into right where they had everything stashed. And she gave us candy, pop. The place burned down, and I know a lot of people heard terrible, terrible about Earl Runyon. He came back to the Grove week after week until we all had to move, and brought candy and pop and gave to all the kids down there. That's a side of Earl that nobody knows. And I think everybody should know that, because he had a business. And yeah, when I found out in later years, he had quite a business. And probably a lot of people snuck down to that business that don't even want to be known that they were there. But the kids on the street never knew anything of it. Did you guys know really, involved in the bad nightlife of Earl Runyon? We didn't. The Grove, we had the river to play in, to fish in. We had the woods to run in and play in.
Wow.
And we had kids that loved each other. Yeah. Now there was talk about the headlights that all the Grovers, and we weren't Grovers, we were people actually of Terrace Park down in Miami Grove that had a street name. The Grovers was something like I said, everybody thought we were contaminated. But we weren't. But like my mother and a few other women down there, they knew the family that had all the headlights. And they went and cleaned them out. There were no more headlights. Because you couldn't keep kids from playing with each other. So that was the way to correct it. St. Thomas Church was good to all of us down there. My dad, he retired from Chevrolet. He had a good job. Now, come Christmas time when they passed out fruit baskets and food baskets and turkeys and hams, my mother did not want one. But the church refused to give anybody else down in the Grove a basket unless we took one. So we took one. But there were a lot of good people up in the park. But there was a lot of hardship because everyone thought we were something contaminated, and we weren't. You guys missed out on a lot. Because we had it all, really.
Okay. I have no fond memories of Terrace Park. No fond memories of Terrace Park or the school. The teachers weren't nice to us kids at all. The Terrace Park kids would make fun of us. They would come up and touch us and go, "Oh, cootie, cootie." How do you think that made us feel when we go home and tell our parents we did not want to go to school because the kids and the teachers did not accept us? And I wouldn't live in Terrace Park today if they gave me one of their homes, because they did not accept me when I was little. Why would they want to accept me now? And the school, the principal, Mr. Wilson, was good to me because he was the one that had me to go to Children's Hospital and have surgery, or I would have never been able to have children or I would have had one leg a lot shorter than the other. But as she says, we were happy kids in the Grove, and it wasn't as bad as Terrace Park thought it was. But like I said, I have no fond memories of Terrace Park School, and I feel like I'm doing very well now, and I wish I could meet some of the kids that called me Cootie, 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 and see what they're like today.
Rita, they're sisters. Rita, not your sisters. Rita Bowman Stevens.
I grew up just like they did, Terrace Park kids at school making fun of us, river rats and trash. I know I'm not, but back then it's always what I felt like. I was a river rat and trash, and nobody liked me because I knew they didn't, except for where I lived. The kids we all played together like me. Dottie and I went to Scouts. The Scout leader's daughter. Don't sit by them, they got cuties, they're cuties. And Mom went to the Scout leader and told her, and she was told, all kids will be kids. And Mom said, that's the way they teach them. We didn't belong. We went under back Scouts. But I thank Mother for that, because we didn't want to be around people that treated us like that. Because we didn't treat everybody else like we were treated. We were taught better than that. Thank you for having me.
Okay, Bobby Scott, representing a long line of the Scott family. Many of you probably know Bobby from, he works up at Davis TV and trains and electronics up in Milford. Bobby Scott.
I probably know a lot of you by faces, but not by names, because I was the youngest. But they told you enough about the bad things that happened to us down there and everything over the years. But I enjoyed my life down there, from when I was born down there up till we moved out. I got to fish in the river. I got to swim in the river. And like they said about Earl and Gladys, they was two of the best people you've ever want to meet. Anything in the world, anybody needed some help with groceries or something, they always seen that we had it. You had a chief up here, that's Matt Cook, that was the same way. He was a wonder for us. He spoiled me a little bit at different times. I did come up a little bit, behind them. Things were starting to change, but it was still rough. But by the time I got to go to junior high, the schools merged, and I ended up going to Marymount, so that helped me a lot. Down there I got with the Fairfax people and the Plainville people and that, and so you sort of blended in a little more. But as far as my good times down there, I just had a tremendous amount of time down there all my life growing up that I was there. And we would die hard on the floods. We'd go back in. There again, I was too little to remember a whole lot, but they'd clean the houses out and we'd be right back down there. And we wandered the streets, and at night we didn't have to worry about the harsh, Earl, like they said, he kept everything inside the beer joint, if you want to call it that. We did go up on the back porch into the living quarters where they had their groceries, was able to purchase candy. Most of the time I didn't have to pay for it, being named after Earl Runyon. Having his middle name, I got treated a little, not no better than they did, but I could take Clorox bottles and turn them in for beer bottles, and he'd Gladys would throw them back out over the hill, and I'd bring them back the next day. So, we used to walk to school every day in the snow. We'd take the shortcut to the dance hall. I just found out that Mr. Rendell has his house down in the bottoms there now. So that used to be our shortcut to school to save 10 minutes. And we, I don't know, it's just so many things to tell you, but mainly it was the good times that I had that I think back on, going with Dad to run his trot lines. We had one up there next to the golf course in the East Fork in Little Miami, and we'd have another one down there by Clear Creek, come in by the building down there, and then we'd have maybe another one out. And we'd catch the big carps and big catfish, and there again, he'd give them to anybody in the grove that wanted them. Mom would fix up all the catfish or whatever, and all the kids would come and eat, so we sort of helped each other in a way.
It's like a big family, really.
Yeah, we was just a big family community that worked together. We didn't have, there wasn't much drugs around then, but we didn't get out to get the booze and stuff that some of the rich kids get. All we knew was playing down there. We could stay out to midnight down there. You didn't have to worry about getting in trouble. You know, unless you turned over somebody's outhouse or something like that. Or go up there and pester the landlord at night, you know, in his house, ring his dinner bell or something, torment Mr. Hodge. But I'm glad they mentioned him because he was quite a character.
Chewing his cigar.
Yeah, him and his cigar.
Him coming to rent, and how he'd give you a break.
Yeah, he'd give you a break. If you didn't have it all, well, give me what you got. Yeah, I remember some of that. But there again, I was, you know, behind everybody else a little bit there. And so not quite as much as that part, but
We all referred to, it was Pappy Hodge. Never Mr. Hodge. It was always Pappy Hodge. Pappy Hodge with these, no, the dogs, the bird dogs. He had the,
black and white ones.
and the warm,
The setter.
yeah. And chewing his cigar. I mean, Pappy always talked with his cigar in his mouth. But he, again, he was good to the people down in the grove.
Then Tex Clennon's there for a while. He had cornfields down there. He'd hide in them. He'd plant his pumpkins in with his corn, and we'd rob his pumpkins. You know, be under there. We'd got to dig a big hole in the ground in the middle of his cornfield and put plywood over it for a place to go hide. And he'd run over it maybe with his tractor or something and start raising heck, and kids had been at it again. So, you know. Then we go back to memories. I do when the holler tree, which was years after that, remained down here. A lot of you people, even that lived in the Upper Terrace Park, knew about it. Where the guy that deserted from the Army hid for days before they found him and stuff like that. And they'd come down and looking for him, and they say he'd climb way up in that holler sycamore tree and hide from him until they left. Old Matt finally got him. But then, oh, I don't know.
Oh, we used to play in that tree.
Yeah.
Gosh, didn't we?
Yeah, we had one time there when Gil Chipwood and George Pearson, they was seining for minnows, and they got an alligator in the river, believe it or not, at that time. And they put it in a wash tub, and they went and got us kids, I don't know, and lined us up so we could see what would come out of the river, so we'd be careful about how we got near it, you know. I don't know if you remember that or
Yeah,
not.
a long time back.
Just a lot of memories like that, you know, that you still, it sticks with you all your life. And now I've got a fine family. I've been married to my wife 35 years. Got 2 daughters, 4 grandkids, so it shows you that even from the rough, you know, eventually comes the good. And I thank God that I'm here today to, you know, to let you know a little bit of the past of Miami Grove, and it wasn't all what people thought it was back then. It was a fun place to live, an enjoyable place to live.
And beautiful.
It was beautiful in the summer, winter, and I remember the ice when it came through, and there was ice so thick on the Allen after the flood that, I mean, some of it must have been 6 or 8 foot thick. You know, I don't know where it all come from, but it was just all squashed up there like mountains, like glaciers. And getting out on it, and fish froze in it, and it just, you know, we'd go down the Allens after flood and look for, you'd find boats and stuff that people had lost from up the river and retrieve them and pull them over to the bank, and you could hold on to them a few days. And sometimes the people would come down here and they'd claim their boat, they'd give you a reward for doing it. And, you know, we could hunt the Allen, you could take a shotgun down here and just hunt rabbits, or, you know, anything you wanted. Nobody bothered you, you know. So it was quite an experience, you know. Over the years, there's a lot. I could go on for 2 or 3 days if I let my mind wander back and think of the things that we did, you know. And we used to visit Mr. Lindell and his dad when he was out there at the house, and I remember that. He was good when he was the mayor and everything. He was decent to us and everything too. He didn't. It's just he could only do so much. He was only the mayor, and he still had all the other council people to help him try to get the job done, and they just didn't want to do it. And I think a lot of them was happy when they seen Earls burn to the ground. They figured it was an end of an era. But we stayed on there and gave it heck for quite a few more years, you know, until the big flood run us out. And then we moved down, well, my family, when we all went our different ways, I ended up down in Plainville, in a big white house down there by the bridge. And I don't know
We
what,
ended up in Goshen.
they ended up in Goshen. I knew they were still in Goshen. That's the reason they would tell us how to find them. But then we stayed there a couple of years, and then with Brother Paul, he moved back to the Grove as a caretaker down there for look over the cottages, because people were destroying them and they didn't know what they was going to do at that time. And then Brother Jerry, I think, lived back down here a little while after that again. And then, of course, my brother-in-law and Faye's husband, they lived down here for a while too. They took one of the old camps over. One thing then, I remember going down there and Paul had a billy goat. We had some goats down there, and the goat climbed up on my brother-in-law's car, was convertible, went through his roof of it. Tore it up. Old Billy, but he was white. And then there was other times, oh, I don't know, there's so many, but let's see here. Well, there was a lady down there, she's mentioned on your paper, there was a lady named Miss Rum. And she had about 15 dogs. And she was like the League for Animal Welfare of the day. She just took in stray dogs, she had them in her house and took care of them. You couldn't move to her house. Not many people wanted to go in there, but I was a brave little guy, so I was in there a few times and helped her out a bit. When maybe a dog get loose, we always knew it was Friday home. And then I had my dogs too. I had an old dog named Bo that was a snake getter. There wasn't a snake existed around when he was there. Then we had another old dog named Pushprong. You probably remember him. And if they got a snake too big to handle, Pushprong get around in the rear to get the snake's attention while old Bo went in and got it. That's what he did.
And I bet they did. I mean,
And Earl and Gladys, they had a home over on Cooper Road that they were building. And Dad was a stonemason by trade and a carpenter, and he did all the stonework for Gladys. And they bartered out and renting groceries and stuff at that time. He worked for them. He built them a swimming pool while I was Stone Bottom. But they come up, they was getting a lot of water moccasins over there in that area for some reason. So they took Bo over there to wipe out the water moccasins. I think they found out after that the guy had the property previously that must have had a snake farm or something. I never picked up on it. There was supposed to be a huge snake running around there, but that was over down towards Reading Road, and then that was the country for Earl and Gladys. They would go down there and stay there for, you know, to get a break from the grove. And when they retired, they moved over there. They lived there till they both died off. Yeah. So Earl
And in
Gladys,
later years, Runyon's opened up a place in
they
Loveland.
had the White Cottage in Loveland after the grove.
Yeah.
Right,
And we all followed them up
right, exactly.
and then Matt Cook, chief of police. My dad was on the fire department until we moved. But I had a raccoon. Now, everyone knows a raccoon. You're not going to pick up a 3/4 grown wild raccoon. Well, I found out you had to have a permit to keep one. So Matt called the game warden and told the game warden I found this animal with a hurt foot. He got me my license to keep my raccoon.
the way it was.
Yeah, I heard stories in later years, but you could never get me to say anything bad about Matt. He come down the grove, give the kids all license for their bicycles, taught them to use their arm signals and proper riding a bike. I mean, there were people in the park that were good to the people in the grove.
Very few.
There was a limited number, but there were.
We had some teachers that was halfway decent, at least I did.
Yeah,
But,
I remember,
And I didn't have those teachers.
I had Mr. Kraft, this was my 6th grade, he disappeared.
And I had Miss Couch.
When I got there.
Yeah, I had her. She was nice.
I love Miss Couch. I got a picture of her standing out the window. And because that teacher, she really meant a lot to me, and I still remember
Our
her.
kindergarten teacher lived there behind us for a couple of years.
Yeah, we had a teacher too that also embarrassed our brother. We went to Catholic school. 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade. Catholic school, you have to wear your uniforms. The boys wear white shirts and dress pants. We went to Terrace Park School. Our brother, they was out playing football. He happened to fall in the mud. And when he did, the bell rang. Everybody went into school, and his teacher right in front of everybody. Well, Robert, doesn't your mother believe in giving you a bath and giving you clean clothes before you go to school?
That happened.
It happened. He asked to be excused to go get washed up. She said, yeah. He walked home, and they had the whole school and part of Terrace Park, the police, fire department, looking for our brother. Mom come right back up with him, and the teacher did apologize in front of everybody. That's how we were treated.
That's why I said, the people up in the park really did treat us bad down in the grove. And most of the pictures you have here are of the flood. The flood in '59 really wiped it out. all the years that we lived there, our house never got water in it through all the floods until the '59 flood. And it got up, I think my mother said about 4 or 5 steps up. Still didn't get up in the house. The lower end of the grove, it got actually coming out the windows of the houses because the property had a taper to it.
It did, it come out our windows.
Yeah, and across the road from that house was where McGee's lived, which would be right about here, and then the river would be on
They're
behind
on
it.
the way.
And '59 flood took that house away. And from my understanding, I was just a kid, that's the first house that ever washed away. There wasn't houses that washed away in previous years. 1959 flood was the worst flood that ever happened down there. And they tried to take a big amphibious duck in to get the last people out. And whoever it was on this, who had this amphibious duck, insisted on how they were going to go in. And needless to say, they didn't get down the road very far. So long about midnight, my mother was furious when she found out. Long about midnight, my brother, who at that time, what, about 14, I guess?
A little bit older than me.
Something like that. He told him he could get the people in to get the people out. So he wades in the water and guides a little cabin cruiser through the woods and got the people out that were still in the river, in the flood.
He knew where every fence.
Because he knew where the fences were. He knew where everything was. And my mother talking to, again, Pappy McGee. I never did call him Mr. or anything like that. Always Pappy McGee growing up. His wife was Boss McGee. I mean, those are the way we grew up. But my mother, so Pappy was talking to her on the phone, and he said, I can hear the house cracking. She says, get over to my house and call me when you get there. About 3 hours later, he called, and then his house washed down the river. So he made it, otherwise he would have been in the house. But it took him anyway, so my brother, he kind of guides them in and brings them back out. So about midnight, they come up to the church, and like I said, my mother was furious when she found out he was waiting in the river. But the 3 families still down there, and there might have been 4, was grateful. Because honestly, that was their last chance of getting out, or they would have washed down the river. And so, you know, and then you want to hear a funny story. This one's funny, on the same flood. Elmer, God love Elmer, he was an alcoholic. Elmer Henderson. And he was an alcoholic. And he was another one that was good to everybody down there. I mean, you know, but him and, who was with Elmer? I think it was.
What he was.
They had a goat. Remember the goat? Well, Elmer forgot. He was drunk, see. So they gathered up this goat and they put the goat in the back of the car. Now he's walking through the water waist deep, and this goat has, I'm not kidding you, this goat has the hold of the back of his shirt, and he's pulling the goat through the water. So him and Pappy Scott, and that's why I always refer to his dad, but, oh yeah, they were good to us all. So anyway, they put the goat in the car. So long about 2 o'clock in the morning, Elmer's heading to his mother's house down in Evanston. Now he's sober. He's driving down the highway, and all of a sudden, right behind his ear goes this goat. And he just about wrecked his car. He totally forgot that he put the goat in the car. So that was a little humor, but I remember that. But I have to close with saying myself that growing up down there, you know, I never knew I was poor, but my mother always taught us, you can have all the money in the world and be the poorest. You can not have a dime and be the richest. And so I was the richest. And because I never knew I was poor. And like I said, we had good friends. We had good people in the park that was good to us. The church was really good to everybody in a time of need. And that was good. We came up and rode the fire truck around, you know, got the apples and oranges like the other kids did. But the Grove kids always stayed to themselves, and Park kids always stayed to themselves. They lost, we didn't. Like I said, I was rich. But I have fond memories of the Grove. And that's, you know, of the Grove itself. Did I have friends in the park that ever come to visit me? Never. But, you know, that's just the way life dealt me. But I'm okay.
That's great. Okay. We've got Max Wiseman, and then I just want you all to know too, there's a lot of wonderful family members here. We have our speakers, but we have a lot of family members too, of Bowmans and Scotts and Wiseman that are here too, and we're going to have some more time too for questions and individual things after, but Max has some great stories to tell, and Max, speaking on behalf of his parents too, because he was a little guy when he lived in the Grove and on the ledge. So Max Wiseman.
Thank you. Yeah, like she said, I'm speaking mainly on behalf of my mom and dad, Wallace and Hazel Wiseman. They live out in Batavia. My mom and dad, Wallace and Hazel Wiseman, live out in the Batavia area, which is primarily where I grew up after we left Terrace Park. They're in their 80s now and not able to get out much, so I asked them a lot of questions about this, and some of the reminiscing through them wasn't exactly good memories for them either. But mine's a mixture of good and bad, and I was probably spared some of the things that the people have alluded to, because when I lived in the Grove itself, I was so young I wasn't yet in school, so I didn't experience that. We later moved up to what's now called Elm Ledge, where there were 6 cottages, and then I started school at that point. And then we had originally moved, they came from Kentucky, 1948. Let me get a little background on Mom and Dad. They both obviously went through the Depression. My dad had cut tobacco for $1 a day. My mom had done domestic work for $1 a week. So coming from that kind of a background, moving into the Grove wasn't really a step down for them. They had a farm at one point where he could barely make a living, decided to come up here. My dad worked in a factory, very hard working guy, had a great work ethic, both of them did, taught that to me. So immediately they told Mr. Hodge that if one of the cottages opened up on the hill, they would pay the extra rent. And maybe you guys can verify this, because my mom says she's only telling the best she can remember. It may not be right. She thought the rent was originally $10 a month.
That's probably about where
No, I was
we
going
be.
to say, yeah.
And when we moved up on the ledge, it was 15. Now you would have thought that it was a better house, but down in the Grove they had electricity, but no running water, so you carried the water in. When it got up on the ledge, which was in the fall of '49, the house did not have electricity in it, and the inside walls were not complete. So you saw the 2x4 studs. My dad ended up finishing all that. Everything, by the way, was done at our expense. Mr. Hodge did not pay for any repairs or reimburse for any repairs. So they had electricity put in by the spring of 1950. So that meant we went through a winter and that Christmas without electricity. The heat was a pot-bellied stove, coal burning, and then I think we used coal lamps the first winter there, and then there was a heating stove, of course, in the kitchen that was either, I don't know, kerosene or what it was. There was like 4 rooms, very small, but as everybody said, it was home to us, and I guess when I asked them these questions, and they were telling me how bad it was, I said, gee, I'm glad I didn't remember it that well. I would have felt worse about it had I remembered it, but I didn't. So I actually didn't want to leave when they decided to move, which later came in '53, and we actually stayed 1 extra year because I didn't want to leave Terrace Park School. My classmates were good to me, but one thing that I will tell you all that backs up what these people said, I was so aware of how they treated kids from the Grove that I didn't let anybody know where I lived. I would actually delay my walk home so nobody was watching me go to the hill. If you can believe that.
Yeah, and do you know that the ledge actually got treated a little better?
I would guess that would be
They
true.
did. For some reason, if you were up on the ledge, you know.
That's pretty sad to say, but that's the truth. The classmates of my brother, it was all very good to him. So it's kind of like when you hear about prejudice, people a lot of times are prejudiced against people because they don't know them. And once they get to know them, they're like, you know, they weren't so bad after all. I had this wrong conception about either a group of people, a class of people, or religion, or race, or anything else. And it actually taught me early in life not to be prejudiced with anybody. I wasn't better than anybody else, and that was also true in reverse. The unpleasant memories are related to what Susan said about my brother getting leukemia, which in September of, would have been 51, I think. You guys were beginning the 4th grade, or just had, and he was diagnosed. And then, of course, in 51, that was like a death sentence. He lived 9 months in and out of Children's Hospital, and eventually died in June of 1952. I brought this picture because it's one of my precious possessions. It's actually a picture that appeared in what's called the Post and Times Star in those days. And it was a visit that Arthur got to make to see the Reds play in April of 52. Just a couple months before he died, and meet his hero, which of course was a lot of people's hero in 52, Ted Kluszewski, in case you don't recognize who's in the picture. That was Big Clue. And I also got to meet Big Clue and thank him for that years later. Of course, he said he didn't honestly remember that specific incident because he said, this always impressed me. I did a lot of stuff like that. And I think he was that kind of guy. So a lot of people like Big Clue. I think, Susan, you said he was your favorite. So we moved eventually in 53, 1 year into the city. My mom and dad were looking to buy a house. We went way out the country, out near Batavia. They bought a house out there, and I grew up in the Batavia school system. And mom and dad moved away for about 13 years and then back to the same house again. So they're very comfortable out there right now. I live about 3.5 miles from them in Pierce Township in Claremont County, so eventually went back to Claremont County myself. So anyway, that's about as much as I can think of. Oh, there is one story Susan wanted me to tell. This kind of reflected again on Mr. Hodge. My dad, who's pretty much an aggressive guy for getting things done, goes to Mr. Hodge and says, if I can organize the men to put water in these 3 houses that don't have water up on the ledge, we'll hook onto where the water left off and run the water lines. Will you pay for the materials? And Mr. Hodge agreed to do that. So they dug all this by hand, and gee, the ground there was more gravel than dirt, I believe, as I remember it. And he dug all that out, put the water in, and it wasn't very long after that he raised their rent because they had running water in the house. So my dad wasn't smart enough at that time to find out ahead of time, you know, you're not going to be compensated, but we at least keep the rent the same for a year or two, but he didn't do that. So, but my image of Mr. Hodge was exactly what they said. He came to the door, collected the rent in cash, chomping on a cigar. He was a big, heavy guy, and I was always hiding in the background watching, so. But that's it, thank you.
I just want to tell you all this, researching this project has been probably one of the most exciting and interesting things that I've done. Just the people, and I have a dear friend who always has said, I would never deny myself the privilege of getting to know a wide variety of people different from me, people who grew up differently, people of different colors, different religions, whatever it might be. I think some of the horror stories that we've heard today, the very sad stories, those of us who were around and witnessed part of that have to know how it gets you in the heart that these kind of things happen in this village. Um, Bobby's brother, who's here, Jerry Scott, was in school with me and my sister, and Sister Helen Fay, who unfortunately died about 5 years ago, but just knowing the Scott families then, Jerry kind of got me started. I have to give him a lot of credit. He was my first phone call, and he said, well, there's Brother Bobby, and then they got to hear about the Bowmans and the Hesses, and I've known Max for a long time, so Barbara Bowman was a couple, he's like a year older than I in school, but just kind of reconnecting. And if you ever want to go up to Milford Frisch's in the morning around 9:30, and some of the Scott boys are up there having breakfast. But I would love it if those of you, is this the Freddie Williams? Is this Chicago? No, that's Climber Road. I mean, like, is this her? Is this her? Look at this one. Now, is this your home?
That's
Okay.
the
I mean, but which one? Is this?
That is the
or-
beer.
That's Run.
That is the beer joint.
That's
This
Run.
is Running
That's Run.
Cafe. Yeah, this is what we've been looking and hoping to come across that one.
We
This
were
is
never
one of the
permitted to
Freddie
enter
Williams.
this way. We entered down here.
Right.
Yeah, the Runyon Cafe. Oh, thank you so much. I would love it, because I know we have a lot of family members here, Jerry, Mary, a lot of Bobby's grandchildren. Anybody that grew up in the Grove or have roots from Miami Grove, if you all would stand up, we want to welcome you.
Bring up forward.
What's that? We're just so happy that all of you are here to share this way.
No, I said
No. Charlena Sellers brought that in. And we heard from, I think Paul Scott told me that, Paul, I know Ralph Scott's here, but Paul is the one that said, when Fred Williams got down to Miami Grove, he said, I'm not leaving here, I want to just paint and paint. And Paul's got a lot of pictures that were painted on cardboard. Yeah, we'll get copies. We'll make copies like we did. Okay, we do have lots of refreshments in the back, and I also want you all to, does anybody have, we have time for a couple questions, and then we want to make it more informal and get maybe a chance to talk one-on-one and Jim.
What was the population at the Grove at it was the largest? How many people live there? Okay.
On that street.
Yes. This is Matt Cook's daughter.
I have to add,
We have some Matt Cooks.
Matt Cook was my father. And so you were telling stories on him. Some of these pictures in here were his. And you know how you go through pictures, oh, I don't need these. But, oh, I don't have the heart to throw them away. And I'd stuff them back in a suitcase and under the bed after he died. And when this group organized, I dug them out. I said, hey, I'm glad I didn't throw them away. I'm a historian, and I believe in keeping family histories and things. They need to be kept. They are part of the history. But may I add a story to it?
Please do.
He would come home and say to my mother, please give me a clean blanket. I have a child here that's cold that I need to take to the hospital.
That was Matt.
Yes. He also, knowing all of the families, he'd know which ladies had ovens and could cook a turkey and which ones could not. And when the baskets were given out, he'd say, this lady can't cook a turkey because she doesn't have any means to. And he'd go to the butcher's shop and he would buy meats out of his own pocket that she could cook. And then he'd say, this lady on down Worcester Pike won't get a basket. But she would cook that turkey for her family. So he'd take the turkey to her. But he wasn't taking from one and giving to the other. He took it from his own pocket to buy to replenish of what she would. So he would enjoy hearing what you had to say, because he knew everything that went on, and everybody in Terrace Park for a number of generations called him Uncle Matt.
It took 22 policemen to replace it.
And it's great that some stories have been clarified. We used to hear what how horrible Mr. Hodge was in Terrace Park. We heard all the bad. And stories, like Max told about raising the rent when his father did all the improvements, but then I also heard that he never threw anybody out. If they had trouble paying their rent, he would say, and Jerry Scott told me this, that he would say, I'll let you work, you can do some chores, or I'll give you another month. He'd go door to door, and that, so there were, there's a lot of good sides. That's why it's good to have all these stories and to hear all this. I think we have time for one more. Ralph, or RJ, Gallardo.
I can relate to the Grovers coming from the inner city to Terrace Park with sort of a similar experience. These people up here are much younger than I, and they had a lot of negative things to say about Terrace Park students, justifiably. But I'd be very remiss if I didn't alert you all of the fact of a wonderful man at Terrace Park School by Phil Bud Heil, who related to the Grovers quite well. And some of you don't remember that because you were younger. But Bud Heil was the overseer of everything. And there's two legends, Bud Heil and Matt Cook, and you've heard about him. And he was a neat guy, and he was very nice to the Grovers. But seeing the picture of Miami Grove, the beer hall, us upper Terrace Parkers supposed to be, if you lived in the park, you were okay. If you lived on the other side of the tracks, you were better than the other side of the tracks. Then Worcester Pike and the subdivision beyond Worcester Pike, and well, yeah, you live on the other side of the pike, and the answer to that was yes, Lower Indian Hill. But Bud's favorite spot on the school grounds, he oversaw the whole school grounds, was the railing leading to the boiler, which is still there in the parking lot, and he perched there to watch over the school ground during recess and things like that. And Bud was a neat man, just a wonderful person. And I am what I am today partially because of him. But he sensed the difference in how people were not relating very well with each other. So Bud would get the people from the Grove and from Newtown was the same thing as Miami Grove, to sit up on the rail with him. Now, when you got to sit up on the rail with Bud Heil, come on, I tell you, you were somebody. So, obviously, their nose didn't go down to the people all the time. And you all were too young to remember that because that was before your era. So, the only point I'm trying to make is, I relate to what they said very well. But remember, there were some neat people in Terrace Park School that were good to the Grovers.
There were.
Thank you so much. And I know it's time to stop.
Did Bud Heil have any children?
Actually, I'm swelling with pride as Rob's telling the story because those of you who don't know, Bud Heil is my father. And my sister and my mom are back there too, and my niece and my kids. So I'm sure they really loved your story, Ralph. So thank you. It's great. Patty?
I just have to say, your stories are incredible, and the courage to tell them. I heard you say it. I did not go preach, but on behalf of the whole community, I hope to ask for forgiveness.
Patty, you put this in together for all of us. That is so true. And the courage, I just am so pleased, and all the wonderful stories and all the wonderful people that came to be here today to support this program. Those of you who grew up in the Grove. Yes. And
I would just like to suggest also that we suggest that the nature preserve be renamed the Grove Nature
Absolutely.
Preserve.
Yeah. We want to do something to honor these wonderful families.
Was to mark where some of the things were. And so we'd like to be able to go down there with some of you to find out, where this was and this was, and have some markers so that, there'd be something left there.
Probably about 10 years ago, I went down there one time. I had a friend of mine. We was riding a bicycle trail. Got down here on Elm, I guess, where the underpass is. Anyway, it was kind of difficult, but we brought the 2 bikes down off of that, through the brush, and come back up and went through the grove. And you know, I was walking and I was telling her, it was my boss at work, and found some of the blacktop road that was up in the middle of the ground. But it was, and it was real. I was next to crying when I was down there. I don't cry much in front of people, and I think that's the only reason I didn't. But yeah, I would like to go down. I've often, and I'll tell you, and Sue told me, because I honestly felt unwelcome down there. I mean, when I went down there about 10 years ago, I mean, I felt like I was sneaking through someplace, you know, and I really appreciate what you said about the renaming. And yeah, it took a lot of courage to say what we did, but I think it needed saying. You know, if you air out your closet, everybody feels good, you know,
Well, I don't feel
because
like I'm on display now, but at first I did. I
My-
felt like I was here being on display.
my sister didn't
Because
want
I'm
to
a
come.
rat. And I always feel like people are better than me, and I'm not as good as anybody else. And that's because I grew up on the river, was being called a river rat and trash.
But you are somebody.
And I always, my sister and I were opposite of each other. I always felt and took from my mother, I may not be any better than you are, but I know I'm just as good. And I've always been a strong one. But I talked to her into coming today.
Good.
Someone's wanting to take me.
Yeah, I know, I would really need to thank you so much. And I appreciate everybody in your pocket, and I really want, we have refreshments back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Paul told me, Scott said that he worked for Miller's, and the Elephant House is where they used to build the septic tanks for Terrace Park. Miller's lived in the Robinson Circus place. And so I have great Scott stories, so I do want to
say one thing?
Yep.
I think, I'm a little bit speaking out of turn because we haven't had a board meeting to decide this. One of the things that some of us would like to do would be to have a kind of a field trip to go down there. And so watching your tracker, those of you who are members and others, you know, ask around, if you're interested in going down there and finding out more about it, you know, let us know. Because we're going to try to, some of us want to try to set up some.
We're going to need guides.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can't.
we got some good guys, and Jerry back there, and Bobby, and Paul, and Ralph, and Dottie. But anyway, please look at the display boards, lots of refreshments in the back, and have some informal conversation with these wonderful people who gave up their Sunday afternoon to be with